Welcome. I'd like to call this Finance Committee meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is assignment of request for council action. We have for the Finance Committee 23206 budget amendments, 23207 grant application bulletproof vest partnership with the police, 23208 expenditure for fiscal year 2022 chip rehab 1137 Oakley Drive in Brunswick, 23209 expenditure for fiscal year 2022 chip rehab 1244 Hadcock Road, Brunswick. 23210, amend ordinance 13423, chip rehab 1495 McKinley. 23211, amend 16113, income tax allocation. 23212, amend chapter 162, income tax, House Bill 33. 23213, increase expenditure PO 2023-1499, chip rehab at 30 Circle Drive. And 23214, amend ordinance 5022, pavilion rental fees for the Parks Department. Next, budget amendments 23206. The first one's from the Forestry and Land Improvement. Keith?
This is a pass-through of a grant, or pass-through of a check we got.
Any questions?
Move to approve.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. And the other one is, I guess, number 46, maintenance of equipment and overtime?
They're just moving money around, so.
All right.
Move to approve.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And the next one is 47. This is just an economic development for advertising.
Move to approve.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. 23207, grant application for bulletproof vest partnership for the police. Chief?
Thank you. This is our annual grant for the Bulletproof Vest Partnership Program. There's a 50% match. We're just requesting permission to apply and permission to accept the grant once awarded. The emergency clause has been requested because we're past due.
Any questions for the chief?
Move to approve with the emergency clause.
Second, including the emergency clause?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. 23208, expenditure for chip rehab, 137 Oakley Drive. Andrew?
Yes, this is a chip project, 137 Oakley in Brunswick for $46,085. It includes a number of miscellaneous items such as front porch steps, windows and doors, hot water heater, sump pump, and plumbing and electric throughout the home. Emergency clause requested as the contractor is ready to begin the project and make the repairs. Thank you.
Any questions?
Move to approve with the emergency clause.
Second, including the emergency clause?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. 23209, expenditure for chip rehab, 1244 Hadcock Road. Andrew?
This is 1244 Hardcock in Brunswick. The project is for $71,925. Again, we've got kind of miscellaneous items here, including a new roof, gutters and downspouts, windows, doors, sump pump, and electrical throughout. There's also a lead abatement aspect of this. So we actually were just awarded additional funds called CHIP LAP funds. That's CHIP lead abatement program funds, and $60,000. So $15,000 can be applied to this project, so that may need to come out another funding source when we're awarded that. Again, the emergency clause requested is the contractor is ready to begin. Thank you.
Thank you. And Andrew, just, we talked to the Board of Control a little bit. I know the program changed. When does the program change, if you could tell them a little bit? Because I asked the question of if we do all these improvements or the CHIP grants, we do all the improvements, what's to stop somebody today from just turning around and selling their house? And I think the rules have changed a little bit on that.
Yeah, so the previous rules, 2020 and prior, you had so many years where it would stay on a lien on your house, like a mortgage, that would dwindle down to, I forget what the number is, maybe 10% of the total, but you would still be responsible to pay that. So we're still getting payments from 10, 20 years ago of people paying off their mortgages or selling their houses. It's difficult to keep track of, even though it is income that goes right back into the project. But from this CHIP program 2022 and forward, there's no longer that payback. So administratively, it's a little bit easier for us. However, they're not responsible for paying any portion of the rehab.
So I just want to alert everybody, just so you keep in mind that, I mean, this is a great program to help, but I think that's a little bit of a loophole.
And obviously, this is a big federal program. We don't have any control over
Right.
how this is.
No, I get it, but I just, so everybody's informed of what goes on, because it used to be, we get paid back a percentage over time, but now, no, there's no payback. Okay,
Correct.
all right.
Move to approve with the emergency clause.
Second, including the emergency clause.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. 23-210, amend ordinance 13223, chip rehab, 1495 McKinley Avenue. Andrew?
So this was originally approved for $65,545. There's been some additional costs for new interior doors and a basement drain pipe, which add $1,125. So the request is increase the PO to $66,670. And again, the project is underway, so the emergency clause is requested. Thank you.
Questions?
Move to approve with the emergency clause.
Second, including the emergency clause.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. 23-211, amend 16113, income tax allocation. Keith?
Thank you. At the last budget hearing, this was proposed, and those who were there voted to do this. As a kind of refresher, a portion of the income tax, 0.25%, which is 20% of the total collected, is required by the ballot language that was approved by the voters to go into our street, stormwater, and utility capital maintenance, capital construction maintenance and repair fund. So that comes off the top first without council's discretion, and then also the costs of collecting the income tax, including refunds. So those two things add up to about a quarter. The rest of the income tax is then subject to council's discretion, and these percentages are of that portion that is subject to council's discretion. The changes are that the police fund is reduced 3.5% to 40. The general fund is increased 0.5% to 31.5. General purpose capital is increased 1% to 3.5. Electronic technology capital is increased 1% to 2.75. And finally, the unanticipated capital contingencies fund is increased 1% to 1.5.
Thanks, and I guess just to clarify, the reason that we're able to make these reallocations is because over the past few years, our income tax collections have gone up a lot. We're talking about the council's ability, or the amount of money subject to the allocation percentages that we're approving out of the 100%, and the modifications is about $15 million. And it used to be like probably under 10, probably about 15 years ago.
Not even that long, not all that long ago, I always would tell you a percent was about $100,000 because it was about 10 million, and that was within the last 5 years, I think. And now we're at a point where, yes, a percent is about 150,000 because we're up to 15 million.
So this is one of the few situations that revenue outpaced expenses increases over the years. I mean, probably doesn't happen often, but this is one of the few times that our revenue is beat expenses. So, I mean, that's a good thing. So with this allocation, I think that looking at the future and our discussions at the meeting had to deal with things that are coming up because of the general purpose capital. We have the court project that's coming in there, and I think the general purpose capital fund has about $4.5 million in it right now. But we have to increase that a little bit to make sure we have enough if other capital items come up. We probably should discuss this again to come up with a new list of capital items, because the last time we did a list was probably about 5 years ago, but I think we accomplished most everything on that list. So I think we have to go back and look at it and see if there's a new list that we need to put together as a council and administration to discuss those items. And with the ever-changing technology, I think the technology fund needs a little bit more money, of course, because things are changing and they're changing rapidly. And I think there's going to be a lot of changes with AI coming that we're going to have to address throughout the city. So we better start putting money away to address those issues. And unanticipated capital, it's been at about $1 million for 15, 20 years. So I think we want to increase that just because of the cost of things. 20 years ago at $1 million is not the same today. So we want to make sure there's a little extra money in that account. But overall, I think all the funds are remaining healthy at this point, and hopefully income tax will continue to grow so that all the accounts in the city remain healthy. And I think we have on hand, if I remember correctly, not counting the grants with the general fund and stuff of cash, at least a year, close to a year cushion so far, about a year. So we're doing good?
Yeah.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Paul.
Thank you. I do want to thank you for the increase with the electronic technology capital fund. I agree with you. We have to be prepared. Last meeting, we saw how much routers are now and other network devices, then that's just one small piece of the puzzle. So I'm quite sure that Sergeant Member Mr. Fields are going to use this money diligently. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
And again, this will go into effect January 1st of 2024. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 23-212, amend chapter 162 income tax ordinance, House Bill 33. Keith?
Thank you. This, we received from Rita. There's not a whole lot to talk about here because, first of all, we don't have a choice. It's based on something the state passed, so we have to do this. And then we've been back and forth with Rita, and we're kind of working out on exactly where these changes go, but there doesn't appear to be anything earth-shattering here. It's mostly just stuff that's got to be changed to match with the new state law.
And Mr. Huber has to approve the language that's going to be in the ordinance to modify it based upon the changes in state law?
When we have the final ordinance language together, yeah.
All right. I guess the question is, do we vote on anything now because we don't have the final yet, or what do we, I mean, I guess that's the question. Yeah, I don't think we can either.
Well, I guess I wanted it in the hopper here so we could talk about it at finance, so we could get it, as long as we get it in November, we don't need a emergency clause.
No, I think that's fine, and again, we have no choice but to adopt the changes at the state level into our code based upon how the municipal income tax will be, the modifications to the code. So if, once Greg approves where the modifications go in our current code, I mean, I guess that's really all that needs to happen. If we can get that done by our next meeting, which is in November, we should be able to be fine, I would imagine, because it'll be adopted before, because that's to be adopted before January 1st of 2024.
Right, it has to be effective by then, so, I mean, we could pass it at the second meeting in November, would be fine without an emergency clause, or even into December if we put an emergency clause. We're trying to get this turned in early and make sure we avoided that, but, right.
Okay. So everybody look at those. I mean, I read through it. It's a lot of legalese, but I guess I'm a lawyer. But, take a look at that, and we can review it after Mr. Huber has his chance to put his eyes on it to approve it at the next meeting or the following meeting. The next thing we have is 23-213, increased expenditure for chip rehab 30 Circle Drive. Andrew?
So there was an existing PO to Paul Davis Restoration for $25,249.08 for mold remediation at 30 Circle Drive. This is actually one from our 2020 chip, which we have an extension on. They found additional mold in the basement, so we're asking for an increase in the PO to a total of $44,789.08. That's a little different than on the RCA. The emergency clause is requested as he's already begun work, and this needs to be completed before we address HVAC and other items in the house. Thank you.
Questions?
Move to approve with the emergency clause.
Second, including emergency clause.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 23-214, amend ordinance 5022, pavilion rental fees for the Parks Department. Jansen?
Thank you, Mr. President. This request is to create a new fee for the Uptown Park under our additional fees as part of the permit. What we're looking to do is reduce the number of spider boxes that we have to put out every weekend, basically from April through October for the various events that we have. What we found out is when people pull a permit, this is mainly nonprofits and for-profit run events that aren't part of Main Street Medina and aren't city-sponsored. What we have found out that they're doing is basically requesting every spider box possible for their event, which means that our staff has to go out and put out 12 boxes every Friday and clean them up at the end of the weekend on Sundays. To put that in perspective, that's 12 boxes. They each have 6 outlets on them. It's 72 outlets, plus the bandstand, plus the 4 corners, and the gazebo. And what we're attributing that to is a convenience thing, and the event organizers are not looking at the needs of the vendors that they have and trying to situate those individuals that are requesting power close to spider boxes. So what we're looking to do is encourage them to organize where the vendors are that need electricity, so that, one, they're either going to have to pay for spider boxes beyond 3, or they just need to organize them together around the outlets that are on the square. We're hopeful that this will help. We work with Main Street every time the farmer's market is on the square. If they're going to set up north, south, Broadway, and get them to minimize their spider boxes and organize their vendors. And it makes our job a little bit easier, and putting out the equipment is very time consuming. So that's the first request here. We did review it with the Uptown Park Advisory Committee, and they voted 6-0 on October 10th to proceed with the fee as recommended. And then in the process of getting this request together, I worked with Kathy Patton and realized that as we had amended our ordinances for our pavilion fees from 2011, 2015, 17, and 22, there were some errors made when those ordinances were passed through, and the only the changes went through council as an approved ordinance. So what we need to do is repeal all of these ordinances and get all of our fees on one page and adopted. So a little bit of house cleaning.
All right, any questions on that? So 3 spider boxes is the starting point, then $25 for each additional one if they want it, and then put all the fees on one page.
Correct, and just for clarification, this will not affect events that are city-sponsored or those that we already waive fees for to keep the costs down, because they're already working with us day to day. This is to address the other ones. Thank you.
Okay, any questions?
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 23-215, the management agreement for the City of Medina Airport. Mr. Huber.
I don't have a copy of what you're looking at. I think it's the settlement with Earl Olson.
Correct, with all the exhibits and all the new leases and the modifications and terminations of the old leases and all the whole thing.
So I wanted to get that in front of the council. We've worked out an arrangement between Ron Waldron and his new corporation to take over management at the airport effective November 1st, and that has largely been done by way of a handshake agreement as between myself, Earl, and Ron, with the hopes that the council moves ahead with adoption of the settlement with Mr. Olson and an approval of the lease with Ron Waldron. I gave copies of the lease agreement with Mr. Waldron to Kathy today. So what you have in front of you is the settlement with Earl. Wanted to have that in your hands so you have time to read it because it's lengthy. And it will require the payment of settlement monies, the approximate sum of $100,000 to Earl, which will compensate him for the fuel system and some other things out at the airport. The new operator at the airport is going to have an open house on November 11th, which is a Saturday morning, about 9 o'clock. Things have been extremely cooperative and smooth as between Mr. Waldron and Mr. Olson. And so far, I couldn't have hoped for anything better. So that's what we have.
Thanks, and Kathy, I know you gave us the management agreement, the FBO agreement, and the lease. I think the whole packet that you received, just scan it to council, which includes all the other amendments to all the other, various lease agreements and the hangars, and it is quite lengthy. It's probably a couple hundred pages long with everything included, so it is a lengthy document. So I guess the question is, once we get that, at the next meeting, we'll discuss it and vote on it, I would assume?
That's correct.
Okay. Anybody have any questions now for Mr. Huber, or do you have any?
I just want to thank Greg for all the hard work, and I know it's a difficult situation that you were put in, and I know I appreciate it as well as my colleagues up here, so thank you.
Any other questions, Paul?
Mr. Huber, has anybody from the Airport Commission been involved with this at all?
No, we have a commission meeting once a year when, and we had one, I don't know, a couple months ago. And it's always been once a year. And so I saw Bruce Gold's complaint about not having an airport commission meeting. We just had one not too long ago, and I usually pile everything into one meeting, usually try to keep it around March. So I'm planning on another airport commission meeting, March of 2024 or thereabout. But this change was discussed at the last meeting in terms of the general outline. Most of what we've done is get the actual language of the lease agreement together at this point. So there's not too much substantive to add to what we discussed before, but I don't really plan on having more than one commission meeting per year.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Peggy?
Can you remind us again, what time is that open house then on November 11th, please?
It starts at 9. I think it's Saturday. I think they're going to provide some food. We've got new maintenance fellows starting up at the maintenance facility. I'm really surprised how well this is coming together, and hopefully it'll continue so.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, I guess we'll entertain that. The only thing we have left is an executive session if nobody has anything else to come before the finance meeting. Okay, Jim?
Okay, at 6:21, I'll make a motion to go into the executive session for conference with the law director of the city concerning disputes involving the city that are subject to pending or imminent court action, to include Mr. Huber. Is there anybody else?
Well, I'm actually going to withdraw that request. The issue involved settling the case with Earl. I was, a couple issues that were still up in the air, but we got those resolved, so I don't really have anything additional to tell you.
Oh, well, I guess that's good news.
Yes.
So I guess there's nothing else to come before finance. The meeting is adjourned.